Hello and welcome to this edition of the Black Knight Local Sports Report. I'm Sarah LaChance and alongside me is Anthony Brakefield.
Starting us off this week is the boys golf team, who has seen success early on in this season. The Knights started off their season in the Cape Notre Dame tournament, where they finished 5th overall out of 13 teams. The Knights then moved into a conference match against the Central Rebels and the St. Genevieve Dragons. The Knights rooted the competition, taking first place by around 20 strokes. That win led the Knights into an 18-hole match play in Sightston against Poplar Bluff, along with district opponent Sightston and Central. The Knights finished 2nd overall, 6 shots behind Poplar Bluff. Since then, the Knights have had a conference match, rained out, and an incomplete tournament at the Farmington Invitational was held out. The Knights look to continue their season this week as they will head up north and participate in the Camdenton tournament.
The girls soccer team currently holds a 5-5 record after earning 5th place in the Windsor tournament late last week. The girls also faced a devastating 0-9 loss to the Jackson girls last night at home, with leading scorer Taylor Schwarzkopf sitting out due to a sprained ankle ligament. The girls are due to start the Carbondale tournament on Friday.
The Farmington baseball team is off to a rough start after winning their first 2 games of the season. The Knights are currently 3-6 on the year. The Knights suffered a tough loss to conference opponent the Potosi Trojans last Friday after losing 5-2 in the 7th inning. The Knights will have 5 games this week, taking on Fredericktown on Tuesday, St. John on Thursday, DeSoto on Friday, and ending the week with the doubleheader on Saturday against Potosi and Jackson.
Coming up after this commercial break, anchors Jack Pinkley and Cole Sutton will be breaking down the NHL and wrapping up NCAA college basketball news. Once again, I'm Sarah LaChance. Alongside me is Anthony Brakefield. Thanks for watching this week's local sports update.
Now at Qdoba Mexican Grill, extras aren't extra. So you can pack your favorite entrees full of flavor. Try something new today at Qdoba Mexican Grill in Farmington.
Mineral Area College, your next step. Enroll today at mineralarea.edu.
Achieving perfect balance is the key to a balanced life.
Do I achieve balance, Master?
Patience. Mercy.
Are you finally satisfied, Master?
I'm sorry?
I said, are you finally satisfied?
Come in for a handcrafted steak burger and milkshake at Steak and Shake.
Zestier, cheesier, and always something new packed with fresh ingredients. All you can eat for only $5.55. CC's Pizza in Farmington. We'll see you there.
Hello and welcome back to the Black Knight Sports Report. I'm Jack Pinkley and this is Cole Sutton. And starting us off on national sports, the NHL season is just about underway with teams having 3 to 4 games left. In the Western Conference, 4 teams have clinched a playoff spot. The Anaheim Ducks, who have the most points in the NHL, the St. Louis Blues, Nashville Predators, and Chicago Blackhawks have all captured a playoff spot. And Cole, those 3 teams in the Central Division, Chicago, Nashville, and St. Louis, are 3 of the strongest teams in the West this year. How far do you see each of them going into the playoffs?
Well, depending on matchups, I feel like this is the year that the Blues can go to the Stanley Cup playoffs and succeed. I think that they can go even as deep to the semis or the actual finals, depending on who they play from the East. I think they can win easily. Chicago's always good. They're strong defensively. They're strong offensively. Predators, they have a great goalie, great offensive play. But out of those 3 teams, this might be a little biased coming from this area, but I think the Blues are the best out of those 3 record-wise and talent-wise, and I think they can go to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Well, if everything ends with everyone in the same positions as they do, the Blues will play a wild card team, and they'll play the best wild card team. So Anaheim will get to play the Winnipeg Jets, who are 8th right now, and the Blues will get to play Minnesota. They've played, the last 2 times I've seen them play Minnesota, they've looked anything but extraordinary. The defense has been lacking. Minnesota just seems like they can do whatever they want when they play St. Louis. So seeing that as the first round matchup, how do you see St. Louis playing in the playoffs? As we know, they're not the greatest playoff playing team. And you got Minnesota, who they haven't been playing well against in the regular season. So can you really see them getting by Minnesota in the first round?
I think they can. And the last game of the regular season, the Blues played Minnesota. And if those two, if that matchup stays where it is, I think it'll be obviously a good matchup to see what it's like in the playoffs. But I think Tarasenko, he didn't play against the Wild the other day. He should be back, I hope, at least by the end of the regular season for the playoffs. If he can get back healthy, they can continue their goalie. If they have a strong goalie, like out in the Eastern Conference, the Canadians, they have a great goalie in Carey Price. If they can keep their goalie consistent, healthy, I think they have a good chance of beating the Wild and going further. And
in the wild card race, we've got the Wild are leading with Winnipeg behind, and the arch nemesis of the St. Louis Blues, the Los Angeles Kings, are actually a point behind the Winnipeg for the last spot. So if the Kings don't make the playoffs, and it's just between Winnipeg and Minnesota, who, as a Blues fan, who would you rather want them to play?
Seeing the way that they've played both teams, they haven't played great against either of those teams, but I think the Wild are a little better. So I'd rather see the Blues play the Jets as an easier matchup to move on into that second round.
And with the new playoff setup that the NHL has introduced this season, or I think last season was the first season, the division winners play the wild cards, and the 2 and 3 will play each other. So Nashville and Chicago will most likely be the first round matchup if everything stays the same. So that gives out a hard team for the Blues right away. But then you've got Anaheim on the other side. Anaheim will get to play Winnipeg. And then the second and third in the Pacific is the Vancouver Canucks, who the Blues haven't beat since 2013, and the Calgary Flames. So seeing as those Pacific teams are pretty strong, Anaheim and Vancouver, they can easily beat the Blues, in my opinion. What do you see the Blues doing once they get past that first round, if they get past the first round?
If they get past that first round, because they've had troubles getting past that first round. Like last year, they were up, I think 2-0, came back, lost 4 games in a row against Chicago. But it's not going to be a tough path for anyone out of the West, because the West, I believe, is the better conference. And if the Blues do get to play a Vancouver, Anaheim, any of those teams can win games. It's not like a March Madness to where you're going to see, obviously, some upsets, but you see a lot of the 1 seeds dominating as 2 1 seeds played in the championship game. I think it's going to be a factor of who can beat who on any given night, and I think it's really going to be unpredictable, but it's going to be fun to watch.
And on the East side, the East isn't talked about as much. It's not as competitive. It's a competitive league, but when you compare it to the West, it just fails in comparison. We've got Montreal, the Rangers, the Islanders, and the Lightning as the top 4 seeds, and everyone's top 4 favorite teams to get out of the East. If we had a West team, say the Blues do make the Stanley Cup, which they'd have to get past Minnesota, Nashville, Chicago, Anaheim, Vancouver, Calgary. They've got a tough road to get to the finals. But if they do get to the finals, who do you see meeting them in there?
I would have to go with probably the Lightning because of that X factor of Steven Stamkos. I feel like he's one of the best offensive players in the league, and if he can play well at the top of his game, I think the Lightning are pretty unstoppable.
Well, when you talk about the East, I think you have to mention the Canadians. They've got Carey Price. He's been one of the best goalies. I think he should win Goaltender of the Year award this year. He's got a great goal against average. I think only Elliott has a better one, but Elliott's been slipping the past couple of games. So Price is one of the reasons that Canadians are going to go. I think they do go into the Stanley Cup, and I say they meet Anaheim. Anaheim just looks unstoppable in the West. They've beat the Blues. They beat Chicago. If you look at their season series against all those contenders in the West, they're winning the series. They have a great record, great team. They're just all around. Corey Perry's one of the best scorers in the league, and I just don't see anybody stopping Anaheim, and I feel like Anaheim's going to win this championship.
And Anaheim, like you said, have played well against all these West teams. And the West, I think, it's kind of like if you look at the West in the NBA, there's obviously the better teams, but there's no clear-cut favorite as to who gets into the finals like it's predictable. Stuff's going to happen. There's going to be lower seeds, teams beating out better teams. I think it's just like the West in the NBA.
Well, Winnipeg can't beat Anaheim. Sweep. Anaheim sweeps Winnipeg in the first round. Then they play the winner of Vancouver-Calgary, who's probably going to be Vancouver. Calgary doesn't really deserve to be in the playoffs. They've had a pretty lackluster schedule. But then they've got to play Vancouver, and Anaheim, they'll beat Vancouver. It won't be a sweep. Vancouver's a tough team. And then they get to play Blues, Blackhawks, Predators. And with Kane coming back for the Chicago Blackhawks, on that side, there's no one that can stop the Chicago Blackhawks. That's what we saw at the beginning of the year when Kane was healthy. He got hurt. They started slipping. They still clinched a playoff spot. So when Patrick Kane comes back into the playoffs, that's another whole nother level that they can play at. They're good at playoff hockey. We know that much. They've always been good at playoff hockey. So I just can't see a team like the Blues beating Chicago Blackhawks.
Well, and like you said, the Blues going into Chicago the other day, Sunday on Easter, beating the Blackhawks was also a huge confidence booster, I think, for this upcoming last stretch of the schedule in the playoffs. But like you said, Patrick Kane has been injured. So I think when Kane comes back, he's going to be a huge X factor, but he could also be a little rusty. He hasn't played in, about a couple months from that injury. So I think if the Blues get that matchup right out of the first round, Kane will probably be at his regular level of hockey if he starts at the beginning of the playoffs. And it's going to be a great series to watch if you're a Blues Blackhawks fan or just a hockey fan. The two teams, if they do play second round of the playoffs, going at it. The Blues are going to want revenge from last year, and the Blackhawks are going to want to take that crown away.
All right, so focusing on the possible Blues-Blackhawks matchup, because I know that's what the NHL itself wants to see, because that's a huge rivalry. What are the Blues going to have to do to beat Chicago?
I think they're going to have to shut down their offense. I mean, Chicago's a great team all around. They have good defense, but I think Patrick Kane, if he comes back, Marian Hossa up top for that team, it's going to be tough. And I think with Kevin Shattenkirk returning for the Blues, it's a huge upside on the defensive side. Their defense has been struggling this season, but if Vladimir Tarasenko can come back healthy, if they can utilize Jaden Schwartz, I feel like he can be a huge part of the offense. It's going to be an offensive battle, I feel like, because there's a lot of star power on each side, but a lot of great goalies on each side. So I don't know. There's a lot of variables, a lot of matchups to find in that series.
Well, I agree. It's going to be there's going to be offense, but the way I see it, it's going to be offense on Chicago's side. Chicago's got the best defense in the NHL. They've got Seabrook's playing out of his mind right now. They've got Corey Crawford, one of the best goalies in the NHL, probably the best in the Western Conference. And then they've got those offensive stars that you've tacked on. And from what I've seen from the Blues, from their first line, with Oshie and Backes, they haven't produced. They haven't played good. They always seem to bring the puck up either the right or left side instead of down the center, and that really limits their opportunities. A team like Chicago, they bring it down the center. They got two guys coming down the center and then two on the wing, and that really just opens up so many opportunities for them. And they're so quick, they can all get back on defense quicker than most teams can get onto an offensive break. So I just can't see anybody beating Chicago until maybe they play a very tough defensive team in the Anaheim Ducks.
And Chicago is one of the best teams in the NHL. I think those three teams in the West, the Blues, the Blackhawks, and the Predators, I think those are the three best teams maybe in the league. And I think even if it's a little bit of a lesser competitive Eastern Conference playoffs, I think the West will be a very fun series to watch. And like I said, I'm probably a little bit biased here, but I think the Blues somehow at least get out of the second round into the semifinals.
All right, well, moving on, the NCAA tournament has finally finished. The March Madness is over as the Duke Blue Devils reign champion after beating the Wisconsin Badgers in the championship game on Monday. Now, the big storyline heading into the NCAA tournament was obviously the Kentucky Wildcats, undefeated heading into the tournament, made it to the Final Four where they lost to Wisconsin. And probably, I'd say 7 or 8 one-and-dones for Kentucky.
Yeah.
So what do you see from them next year?
I think Kentucky I don't think they're going to be as good as an undefeated team because nobody can predict that. But I think they're going to be good again. John Calipari, who got inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, is going to bring in those recruits because it's Kentucky. The undefeated season obviously helps a little bit, bring in more attention, more recruits. But I think there's going to be some kids from this roster that they have that are going to stay. I think maybe even the Harrison twins could stay. It's probably not likely. We didn't think they would stay last year, and they did. And look, where it almost got them to a national championship. I think Devin Booker, the sensational shooter, could stay. Because I think next year, if he stays and develops his game, he could be a higher draft pick, make a little more money. I think Willie Cauley-Stein is gone as a junior. I think he's going to leave. Dakari Johnson, another big postman, could possibly stay. Karl Anthony Towns, tremendous talent. In my opinion, I think he has bigger talent than Jahlil Okafor, but that could be another case of bias there because I am a Kentucky fan. But I think Karl Anthony Towns is going to be one of the better NBA big men coming out of this draft class, and I think it's going to be a huge hit to Kentucky if he leaves.
All right, now Coach K has finally adapted to the one-and-done era, and it got him a national championship. So with that one-and-done era now intact at Duke, 2 straight years where their best players are going to be one-and-dones, do you think Coach K wins more titles in the next couple of years, or do you think it's going to take him a little bit of time like it took him to get his 5th?
Well, that's where I'm not sure because I'm not an expert at who they have coming in. If they have another big recruit like Jahlil Okafor and they can somehow keep some of those role players that can turn into stars if they play longer and they get a little more time on the floor, like Grayson Allen, I don't think that he's necessarily jumping into the NBA draft, but if they can keep him, a couple other players, and then bring in new recruits because Duke's a powerhouse, they obviously just won a championship. If they bring in more recruits kind of like Kentucky and they keep those players there, they're going to reign supreme for a long period of time if they can continue to bring in those one-and-dones. And some big talent like that, those one-and-done type kids, some of them do choose to stay for at least another year or two. Willie Cauley-Stein last year, I think he could have entered the NBA draft just like Julius Randle. And, I mean, he stayed, developed his game a little bit, and I think he's going to be a high draft pick.
All right, and big storyline out of Wisconsin. Frank Kaminsky's gone. That was his senior year. And that's the only person they lose. They're going to keep Gasser. They're going to keep Decker. Bo Ryan's coming back as head coach. Do you see Wisconsin doing this again, getting to the championship again, maybe winning it next year? Do you see them staying as a collegiate powerhouse in basketball?
I think that they're going to. I think until Decker and Hayes, and when they leave, I think they're gonna fall a little bit. But again, they're gonna have a big recruiting system. A team going to the national championship game, beating an undefeated team, they're going to get recruits. Wisconsin was a great team before that, and I think they're going to be good. I don't think they're going to go to a championship next year because Kaminsky's a big loss. Kaminsky was a great player. If you're a fan of him or not, he's a great player, and I think that's going to hurt them, but I still think they can be successful, not as successful as – I mean, I think if you take that Wisconsin team without Kaminsky and you put them up against Kentucky, I think it's a slaughter. But I think Kaminsky was a huge part in that win and that program this year.
And I don't know if you've been keeping up with the recruiting class this season, but out of the McDonald's All-Americans, LSU led the way. They had 2 All-Americans recruit to them. So LSU now, to some people, are the favorite to win the SEC next year, as everyone expects Kentucky to lose basically their entire team. Mm-hmm. Do you see Kentucky getting another recruiting class like this, maybe a little bit lower? I don't know if you can ever have another recruiting class that was as good as this one. But do you see LSU possibly taking over the SEC from Kentucky?
Well, the SEC is usually like a 2 or 3 team race. It's usually like, Florida, LSU, maybe Ole Miss, and obviously Kentucky. But that recruiting class they had was special. You're never going to find a recruiting class with 9 McDonald's All-Americans again for a while at least. I think they'll be in that kind of like 5 to 6 range of those All-Americans because it is Kentucky. They're a big school. They have lots of talent still, even though they're losing a lot of great players. But, I mean, like I said, it's just rare to see that 9 McDonald's All-Americans there. It's just incredible.
All right, and final question here. It's been raised many times since the Final Four started. Out of those Final Four coaches, Calipari from Kentucky, Bo Ryan, Wisconsin, Coach K, Duke, and Tom Izzo, Michigan State, who's the best March Madness coach out of those 4?
If we're talking just March Madness, just the tournament?
Just the tournament. Once March hits, who's the best coach?
This year I think it was Tom Izzo. Bringing that team, I saw a thing on ESPN back earlier in the season. His team would break down on Indianapolis on 3, and he told them not to because they weren't ready. And they proved him wrong, and obviously he developed them into the year into a Final Four team. And I didn't expect Michigan State to get to the Final Four. I thought the Rick Pitino team in Louisville would make it, or NC State or something. I didn't expect Michigan State, but they proved that they were there. They were worthy to get there, beating those tough teams, obviously losing to Duke by a decent margin. But I think Tom Izzo gets his team prepared the best out of those 4. And then all those 4 coaches are great coaches. Obviously, Calipari's great. Krzyzewski's could be one of the best coaches of all time in college basketball. But this year alone, just the Final Four, I think it was Tom Izzo and the Spartans.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Join us next week on the Black Knight Sports Report. I'm Jack Pinkley, and that's Cole Sutton.